Hi everyone, hope you're enjoying today. My name is John Savage and I'm going to be talking to you today about the sometimes perilous journey of moving from your IoT concept to bringing a concrete project into production with all the bells and whistles that go with that. So I guess a lot of people in this room at the moment you're very familiar with various horizontal stacks in parts of the IoT stack, to say, very good at sensors, very good at gateways, very good at edge processing and so on. The challenge with bringing an IoT solution into production end-to-end is exactly that end-to-end part of it. Bringing all of those parts together in a cohesive, coherent whole that's going to stand up against the rigors and tests of the real world is a big challenge. Who I'm kind of mainly aiming this presentation at today would be if you're an organization out there that's about to embark upon an IoT journey, where you've got the idea of something in the IoT space and you want to implement it, and you've got finite resources. If you're Google and you can afford to make as many mistakes as you want, well then, that's great. We've an awful lot of experience in this space, and I hope that some of the learnings are going to help you in getting that journey a little bit easier for you. A bit of background about ourselves. So I'm, as mentioned, I'm founder and technical director of Action Point Software. We're a custom software development house. In the IoT space, we act as SIs. So we're systems integrators. What that means is essentially we've got a partner network we've built up over the years of people that we bring to the table in order to deliver the end-to-end IoT solution. The example there is we're working on a proof of concept in the industrial Internet of Things, Manufacturing 4.0. We're working with an automotive manufacturing company whereby we're actually coordinating the work of about 5 different partners, Dell and Intel being key partners in that process. It's a proof of concept that I hope to be able to tell you more about in about a month or two's time. But essentially from the customer's perspective, they're dealing with us, and then we're coordinating all of the external parties to make the whole thing work and work well. I guess over the years, one thing that Action Point has done is we've probably turned down more IoT projects than we've taken on, because in the early stages we have an awful lot of discussions with clients about what exactly they're trying to achieve. And some of the common issues we've come across are these three. And they do look like common sense when you put them on a slide like this. But in a regular software projects, it's very rare we get one and never get two of these issues on a regular software project. However, we found for some reason that we're going to go into in the IoT space, it's quite common that you'll have maybe 2 or even 3 of these issues on an IoT project. And we'll go into some detail now. So for starters, and I'm a techie myself, so I can say this, don't let the techies rule the roost. What we mean by that is, you've probably heard the phrase, IoT is a fantastic solution looking for a problem. What that essentially embodies is the notion that the technology that's driving the explosion of IoT is while it's hard, it's really becoming easy compared to where it was 3 to 5 years ago, let's say. So it's really, really easy to build really, really cool technology systems that technical people love doing. However, unfortunately, at the end of the day, someone's got to pay the bills. And there has to be a clear, cohesive objective around which you're going to put the project. What is the goal of the project? And everybody on your team has to be aware of that and has to buy into that. That objective is not always financial. I'll give you an example. We worked with Aga Rangemaster a number of years ago, built an IoT solution to connect their ovens up to the internet and allow you to control them from an app. Their explicit goal was not revenue, it was market awareness in a younger demographic, and it was quite successful in that goal. So essentially, you've got to have the concrete concept of what you're trying to achieve and communicate that to everybody on the team, and once you do that, then you'll be well on your way. Then you've got the flip side is don't let the non-techies rule the roost. IoT events are absolutely fantastic, and they're often littered with really, really cool 10-minute demos that show how with the clicks of a few buttons you can have an edge sensor connected to a gateway, talking to the cloud and tweeting when you take your hand over a light sensor, let's say. They're really, really cool demos, but the challenge with those is that they can lead the non-technical people into this false sense that it's all easy. Specific things are easy, but bringing the whole thing together is quite complex. Action Point's involvement in IoT projects, we're often the first technical party to the table. We get non-technical customers coming to us with the vision, and it's a very, very interesting initial conversation. But it does lead to an awful lot of expectation management in that first conversation. As a non-technical person, don't be afraid of the technology, but make sure you're working with a technical team that can communicate with you in language that you can work with. Listen very carefully what the technical people are telling you and make sure that you adapt what you're trying to achieve to what the technical constraints actually present to you. Also, there's often going to be very subtle things that the technical guys might bring to the table that are going to have a very big impact on your business. So if you have an existing business and you're adopting an IoT strategy, You've got to be very aware that it could affect your sales, it could affect your finance, it could affect your entire business model. Your operational activities could be changed significantly, your customer service, your deployment. It could have a big shift for everybody across your whole team. So, make sure as a non-technical person that you're watching out for that during the early stages of the IoT project, and you understand as much of the impact across your team as you can. So, I guess what you need to do is balance the technical and non-technical. And a challenge with IoT is that from the outside, a really good IoT project looks like magic. It looks really, really easy. And there are certain things in life that look easy until you try them. So, you've got to make sure that you've got the balance right. You've got to get the bottom-up technical guys, bring the detail and the realism into the project mix, but you also have the top-down business people with their vision and their drive as to where they want the project to go. And if you can find that balance and get your team to operate in the middle ground, that's where the magic in the IoT space happens. So the third issue that we've come across quite regularly, and it's a very subtle one in the IoT space, is what we call tentative stakeholders. And a tentative stakeholder is one of two things: either someone that's uncertain or someone that's not in the room. And I'll give you an example. Like the easy IoT proposition is in the manufacturing space. I think everyone in this room will probably say manufacturing 4.0 is the next big thing for IoT. It's very easy to define what you want to do, very easy to explain what the output is. But take a step back and look at it from the perspective of the MD of a large manufacturing plant that's humming away and going through millions and millions and millions of euros a week maybe. He hears from all of his colleagues and peers and all of the industry press that you should be doing IoT. Manufacturing 4.0 is the next big thing. You let loads of sensors all around your factory floor, you get loads of reports, loads of data, magic will happen and you'll save money. And the challenge from that person's perspective is understanding how that magic piece works. They're going to look at it from the perspective of what's my ROI here? And they're very comfortable, working on what the ROI is off a new manufacturing line, a new product. If I bring a new product online, what's that going to take? If I put a new pick and place machine, what efficiency is that going to bring me? That's a very clear thing that they're very used to. However, IoT can push someone out of their comfort zone. And in that case, sometimes the guy who's actually in charge of the purse strings and the project and driving it all can be uncertain. He's been asked to take a leap of faith. And someone that's not too sure and is actually taking a leap of faith, they can be difficult in driving a project. The other area that we have is the missing stakeholder. And when you're talking with very large IoT projects, so for example, smart cities, the issue that you sometimes get in smart cities is who is the stakeholder? And it could be the general public, but the problem is on the project team, you don't have a representative for the general public. So now who's going to drive the requirements? Who's going to drive the project forward? And it becomes a bit of a challenge. Smart cities is also interesting in that you have a split between the stakeholder that has to fund the project, probably the local council, and the stakeholder that's going to get the benefit, which is the operational person actually using the IoT solution. And at the end of the day, if there's a conflict between the two of them, then who's going to win, essentially? So you've got to end up in a situation where your stakeholder is comfortable and committed to the project. That's fundamentally it. If you've got a project where the stakeholder isn't quite driving it, you could end up in a world of hurt. Now, the stakeholder's primary responsibility is to drive the project, but they also have to fund the project. So if you ask a stakeholder what's going to make them comfortable, they're going to ask you one question. Any guesses as to what that question is? No, it's how much is it going to cost? So essentially, we've been building custom software for well north of a decade at this stage. And when it comes to the how much will it cost question, we're very, very well tooled up to have that conversation. Essentially, it quickly becomes a case of we don't know how much it's going to cost at this stage because we don't know what it is, and actually nor do you. We're going to have to work together to work out exactly what it is, put the scope together in place, and put a project budget, and then off we go. It's a very defined process that works really, really well. In the IoT space, though, it's a whole lot more complex. And what we've started doing in Action Point is changing the phraseology from a project budget process into a journey. And here's why. I'll give you an example. So about a year ago, we had a smart light bulb IoT startup company come to us. And they were probably the best prepared team that came to us for a very first initial client meeting. They came in with the bulb in their hand. They had all the electronics wizardry in the bulb. They were telling us that this allows you to dim the bulb, change the color of the bulb, have bulbs talk to each other, report energy usage to the cloud and so on. It was a pretty fantastic bulb. And then they had great screen-by-screen mock-ups of how their app is going to work. And they're able to talk me through the mock-up. You're going to go in here to set your mood. You're going in here to set your tone. You'll hit here to automate your house lights at night. You'll go here to see your energy usage and so on. It was a really cool concept. So essentially the question that they posited to us was, how much is it going to cost to build an app? And it sounds fairly easy. Well, we ended up with like a 1-hour conversation with them that significantly changed the course of their business. So we started kind of enumerating the main areas that are involved in bringing an IoT project into production. And these are the top level items. But within each of those, there's an awful lot of further consideration to take. Now, I'm not going to read through every single part of this, but two of them jump out in particular that are subtle but surprising, the impact that they'll have. The first is just consider the story of you eventually bring this thing to market, it's in B&Q, and a customer buys it. They bring that bulb home, they've got their smartphone, the smartphone's connected to the cloud, the bulb isn't. How do you get the bulb connected to the cloud? It's basic device provisioning, but it's got a huge impact on how you actually manufacture the bulb and what has to go into the bulb. So let's say you take the path that I'm going to get that bulb to connect via the user's local Wi-Fi. So for starters, you're assuming every house has got local Wi-Fi or you can't sell your bulb. So if it's going to connect to local Wi-Fi, it's got to know how to, username and password and so on to get into the Wi-Fi. There is no screen on the bulb and there's no room for a screen on a bulb. So you now need a Bluetooth connection between the bulb and the phone so the phone can actually talk to it and give it the details so as it can connect to Wi-Fi. So all of a sudden out of that conversation, the bulb now needs a Wi-Fi chip and a BLE chip. But then what if you think of, if you look at your target market and not everyone's got Wi-Fi, you now might need a Zigbee local gateway. For the energy side of things, you might use the likes of Sigfox to communicate your energy usage back into the cloud. But for remote control where you need immediate response, that might not be the issue. So there was a whole conversation kicked off on that one question alone that had a significant impact from unit costs, electrical design in the bulb, and so on. So that was one interesting conversation. And then the other one was, on the back end, if you're selling this into the customer base, into public customer base, they're going to have questions. They're going to want to call somebody. That person they call is going to have to be able to answer those questions. So you basically need a whole customer service interface into your back-end cloud system. So, when did the gym last turn on his lights? Have we not seen the lights for the last 2 days? If we haven't, that's probably a broadband connectivity issue. Giving the customer service person the tools to be able to intelligently talk to the end customer about where the possible problems are was a pretty big challenge. So the customer service piece became big. And then even it came into what's your business model? How are you going to sell these? Are you going to actually sell an annual subscription for the bulb access? Well, if you do that, now again, your customer service system's impacted because you got to handle billing, you got to handle refunds and so on. So you can see that these little small threads, when you start pulling them, become very big things. And that's why when you're building an IoT project, you've got to take it a piece at a time. So does anyone in the room know what this equation is? Boom, who said that? Nice, okay, yes, Drake's equation. So essentially the Drake equation was positive in the 1960s to answer a pretty much impossible question, which is how many alien civilizations might exist in the universe that we have a half a chance of talking to via radio waves? It's a big question, but what this guy did was he broke it down. And the value of Drake's equation is not any given answer, because there's a lot of controversy over the answers, but it's given people the thought process and the structure with how to address what is otherwise an almost impossible problem. I won't even go into it, have a Google of it. It's an interesting topic in itself. It'll cost you half a day in Wikipedia though, so be careful. So what Action Point tried to do was we explored, could we do a Drake equation for IoT budgets? And we gave it a shot, and our Excel sheet got really complex really fast, and it was nowhere near as eloquent as the previous slide. So by the measure of eloquence alone, I'd say that costing an IoT project isn't as simple as finding how many ETs are phoning home. But if you are going to go talk through how much your IoT project is going to cost, there is a process, there's a mechanism to do it. And you start out with the 8-layer stack that probably everyone is familiar with in this room. You cost each individual layer. But the problem is you've got the hidden complexities and the hidden interdependencies. So a simple example there is you need to have software running in your edge gateway. So let's say you go with really, really simple, cheap software running on the edge gateway. That might be fine for a low volume deployment. But in a high volume deployment, the unit cost of your gateway may be a lot higher because the software needs more horsepower to run. Also, your connectivity costs of your backhaul might be more expensive because simpler software will be more verbose and use a lot more data. So finding the balance there between how much you invest in your software versus what your unit cost and connectivity is are very important balances to strike. Another one is near the bottom there, you'll see analytics. If you know what your analytics requirement is from day one, then great. Like if your analytics requirement is very big, you want to know everything about what's going on in your IoT, then you're going to have a lot of sensors out there. They're going to have to be talking to a pretty complex, powerful gateway. There's going to be a lot of data coming back, a huge amount of storage. You're going to have data warehousing challenges as well to make your analytics run in a reasonable time. On the other hand, if you do very simple analytics, all of those things become very simple. So you can see how a question at one layer can have massive impacts across the whole lot. And then, perfect. So essentially, when you're looking at costing the IoT project, you have to take it a bite at a time, basically, and MVP is key. You've probably heard MVP, and in the IoT space, doing a minimal viable product is absolutely critical. But you've got to do it right. And the example here is an MVP done wrong and an MVP done right. In the IoT space, an MVP done right is when you go through every single layer. So your first version is touching every single part of the IoT stack. In this MVP, the project goal was something to get around it. And at the very start, they started building it incrementally, but at no point in time was it usable until the end. Whereas when an MVP is done right, you boil it down to its essence. So I want to get around, the simplest way to get around is a skateboard. You get some user feedback, you add a handle, that becomes a bike, and very quickly you've actually got a usable mode of transport. And that's the mindset to be in when you're designing your MVP in the IoT space. So I guess in summary, I hope that some of this gives you an idea of where some of the road bumps might be, or speed bumps might be, and it gives you some of the tool sets in delivering your IoT project. I just can't overemphasize enough that mindset of building an MVP. And the other piece of advice I'd strongly give you is that no organization can do an IoT solution end-to-end on your own. You're going to have to bring in third parties to do so. When you do that, bring them in as partners, not vendors. And what I mean by that is if you bring in someone and it's on a vendor basis, you're kind of keeping them at arm's length. You've got to bring in someone that's going to work very closely with you, be a part of your team, and enable your success. So I'd like to thank you for your time, and if you've any questions or